Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Paving the Ways podcast. Today we have a wonderful guest on the show. It's Miroslav Petrovic. Miroslav is a TEDx speaker, teacher, and facilitator who's worked with over 5,000 people across the world, supporting them to bring their message to the world. Through the Alivened Speaking Institute, he teaches how to go beyond didactic talking at people and how to deliver your message in an embodied way that is enlivening and engaging for audiences. So welcome to the show, Miroslav.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you for having me.
So we've never met in person, but for the listeners, I took part in one of Miroslav's 6-week embodied speaking course, would have been probably September, October time, which greatly helped me with my public speaking. And so I thought it'd be a wonderful guest to have on the show. So something I like to ask the guests is what a day in the life for you could look like at the moment.
God, this is like gonna vary so much. Right
Yeah.
now, you probably don't want to be in one of my days. Um there's a lot of writing. I'm finishing a book. So it's kind of half writing, half editing. So my mind is just constantly in that. And on top of that, I've got like a video that's coming out, and which is like capturing one of the students' journeys, a new website. There's like a whole list of projects, and they're all happening simultaneously. So it's a bit like hot potato. I'm trying to hold the project for as little as possible before I throw it back to the next person. So yeah, not an overly fun time unless you love I don't know, dancing with pressure or something like that.
Which I imagine you probably quite find some enjoyment out of.
I do. I
Yeah.
went to see a massage therapist at one point. Now I see her every month, and I go to her. She's quite intuitive too. And she's like, "What do you want to work with this time?" And I was like, "I just need to get the pressure off." And she started massaging me, and like 5 minutes into it, I was like, "I think I need more pressure." She was like, "This is crazy. It's like your mind doesn't want it, but your body's yearning for it."
Yeah, something I have remembered you touching on was kind of finding your edges and going into the places where you feel vulnerable or uncomfortable. Could you just speak a bit to that for the listeners?
Yeah. Um, I'm always playing with how do I say this in as few words as possible. Essentially, consider a reality where maybe our relationship to fear is our relationship to our own potential. So the things that we're here to do and achieve and bring into the world. And I don't mean like a Tony Robbins style success. For me, success is more so like being in service and being in the most genuine service I came here to be. And I feel we all have a sense of that. It's like, okay, doing this kind of work, I feel fulfilled as I'm giving. And um, fear is essentially just the threshold of letting go of the safety we currently live in and accepting more life and more fullness. And as we go through that threshold of fear, quite often the odor, if you will, or the scent that comes out of moving through that doorway is vulnerability. And like the purpose isn't necessarily to achieve vulnerability, but vulnerability is just what happens as we go through that doorway. Kind of like to satiate your belly, you have to chew food. It's quite often it's what tends to show up in that process. And I'll just share a few more words. Sometimes people think of vulnerability like, I remember one of my first coaches was like, "No, we can't use that. People are going to think they're weak." I was like, "No, I get it, but like, no, that's not what the word is holding." In our minds, sometimes it holds this idea of like a wounded animal or a wounded child or something. And vulnerability is literally, in this case, it's crossing the threshold into any area where you haven't had expression. So for some of my students, that's mean like getting angry or raising their voice or speaking quietly, or most commonly, like vulnerability is just taking a breath on stage without needing to say anything, which is why when people typically get on stage with no experience, they speak at 200 miles an hour because they don't want to feel what's happening in their body. So it's never about the action, it's more about stretching the threshold of where life wants us to go.
Mm. So why do you think that public speaking is so vulnerable and so scary? It seems to be almost one of the top fears that people would say. And I'm curious what you think about what that kind of says about our current society that that's so scary for most of us?
I'm going to come to it, but the first thing that came to mind is, do you have any friends that are really like, um, just like really present with you? And when you sit down with them, you know, it's like, oh, fuck, I can't hide. They're going to ask me about what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a very similar experience. And maybe like if you're that person in a group of friends, people might even say to you, it's like, oh, sometimes I avoid seeing you because I know you're going to force me to face the stuff I'm avoiding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we play both parts. Like in one group of friends, we might be that person. And in another group of friends, like someone else is seeing us as deeply as we see other people. I think public speaking essentially forces us into that experience. And because there is so many people looking at us, we're forced to see the parts of ourselves we may not be comfortable with, that we may be avoiding, that we may have just buried underneath the surface. Like as you put so much attention in one room and awareness, and it's all kind of going at one person, it's got no option. But sometimes I say, if you think of this as like electricity, and each of the people are like batteries essentially in a room, that's a lot of like voltage heading at one person. And it's either going to bring up anything that's been repressed in the nervous system, or if we can ride the wave, it's going to be a very enlightening experience because you're working with a lot of energy.
So how can we, for the ones that do brave getting on stage, not even brave, but do decide to get on stage, how can we, or how can one ride those waves with more ease or more comfort?
Yeah, it's a good question. Practice. And like when I say practice, this isn't like standing in front of the mirror. I actually recommend doing trainings like with me or with someone else that can support you to locate what's going on in your body and to slow down and to feel it. And I'm like, I could give you techniques like breathe, and I could say things like actually meet your audience, but these words aren't going to matter when you step on stage, because your unconscious nervous system is going to, not unconscious nervous system, but your deeper ingrained patterns are what's going to take over. And even if I tell you now, you just have to breathe, you're not you, but people probably, and I've seen this, people will probably forget that unless I'm telling them right before they go on stage, because the experience just shoots the nervous system into a whole different power thing. It's like you're going from gear 0 to like gear 6 straight away, and it's too much. But what I find does work is exposure, and exposure in a way where you have someone helping you locate what's going on that you're not aware of while you're up there. So when I'm coaching students, like usually we start first with just kind of getting a sense of presence and connection to who they are when they're on stage. And this isn't a logical exercise. It's not like you're journaling about it. It's like actually locating what's going on in you and your body when you step into an environment that's a lot more active. So we're not disassociating, essentially. I don't know, I feel like I could go on. Do you want me to?
Yeah, keep going.
From there, and the reason I invite this idea of training or working with someone is because getting on stage is quite a sacred or special experience. It's not the kind of thing you can do every day. You know, if you're a writer, you can write every day. If you're a singer, you can sing every day. If speaking is something that's calling you, it takes a lot of work to get on a stage. It takes even more work to build your own stage to get on top of. And I'm not talking about like physical building. I mean, creating a marketing, promoting, putting people in the room, running the event. Like it's massive. It's a whole skill set on its own. So this sense of every opportunity you get on stage, you're either growing from it, leaving an impact slash potentially, if you're in a business or whatever the thing is, even if you're offering something for like a volunteer service, you're either making enrollments and making money, or you're just getting up there and working for your own stuff. Now, if you spend like a month or two to get on a stage and all that happens is you work for your own stuff, that's like a lot of investment for not much return. If you can do some of this early work beforehand and work through the stuff that's been stuck in your nervous system, and then when you're getting on stage, it's like we're always doing the work on stage. but you can actually focus more into that second quadrant of um, leaving an impact, connecting with people, leaving something deep, and hopefully even having clients or volunteers or whatever, like your service or offering or purpose for speaking is, like actually having people say, yeah, I want to work with you. It becomes a lot more rewarding a lot quickly. And sometimes I've had people say like, oh, I kind of want to do some work, but I'm not going to be on stage anytime soon. And I'm like, it's a bit ridiculous. It's like a sporting team going, yeah, look, the World Cup it's a couple of years away. We might just leave it and train later. It's like they're going to be a mess when they step into that level of charged environment without having an embodied relationship to it beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember, I think I read it somewhere that even if you don't want to be a public speaker, public speaking is a tool for everyone. And I really agree with that, how it just changes your way of navigating through the world. And I think I've seen you say before, like speaking is a spiritual path. What was it for you?
Hmm.
Or what is it for you?
I feel to ask you first, how did it change things for you as you did it?
I guess it brought me more aware of how I'm feeling as I approach a group of people, or I have to speak up for something that maybe I feel a bit uncomfortable with. I definitely feel over the past year I've been able to like ask for what I want and to speak up when I want to speak up, and really noticing when I'm holding back from saying something maybe intimate or slightly uncomfortable to someone one-on-one as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's nice. That I hear a lot of this stuff fairly often. Uh, my experience to it was, so I like to say this being very general, but you could say there's two approaches to speaking. One of them is what I call the old school approach, and it's a bit like what we all learned in high school. Write your speech, memorize it, and then get up and recite it. The memorization bit, you probably spend more time in than you do actually speaking, though. And if you're speaking in this way, it's not a spiritual path. It's just more or less boring, if I'm being honest. Um, Unless people can get it beyond that stage and it becomes like they can bring more of their personality through. Because otherwise, what you get 9 times out of 10 is they're just standing in front of you reading something that's in their head. There's no sense of connection. Generally, I say if you wouldn't do it with a friend when you go for coffee, it's not a great thing to do on stage. And that's not a rule, but it's like you're not going to sit with a friend and recite something you've memorized just before. Um, the second version, which I call the enlivened method, is when you start with the essence of who you are. So here, what takes you kind of lots and lots of recitation, so you're not thinking, so you can just get up and be yourself. Here we kind of start with the essence of who you are. And the scary thing about that is you could call that essence by many names. Who you are in your genuineness, your soul, your, I don't know, like the unbridled expression that's moving through you. Someone was like, it's like erotic innocence. I'm like, yep, that works too. Like the name doesn't matter, but it's essentially what's moving through you when you're not trying to control things. Like that childlike innocence. Every time we get on a stage, there's an opportunity to connect deeper with that if we're working with this enlivened method. When you're offering or moving towards that part of yourself, people can't help but not be present with you. It's like a deep and meaningful conversation, but you could be talking about anything.
Mm.
And to be in relationship with that continually means two things. Like the stage is going to bring up what's keeping you stuck and not able to connect with that, which could be like the fears and the nervousness and whatever. And it's also going to challenge you into bringing forth more of the expression that is going to have you connect with that same essence. So that can sometimes, like for me, what that's looked like is I remember one particular event where I was the last speaker on like a 2 or 3 day event, and most people they've kind of like had enough. They weren't really, some of them weren't even wanting to listen. They were just on their phones. And I was like, right, if I just stand here and talk, they're not even going to listen. I'm going to be talking into the void. And suddenly my heart started pounding and I was like, oh, I see what I need to do. And at that time I was quite introverted, even though I was getting on stages. But in this case, like what pulled forward was I was seeing myself, because it was the last day and all these people had left, there was all these empty chairs. in the room. So I started getting up on the chairs and walking through the room as I was speaking. And for me at the time, those are completely like, it wasn't me, you know, it's not the kind of thing Miroslav used to do until then. And the stage, I feel, has invited me to bring so many parts of myself that were hidden, sometimes even from me, out into the world. And this is the relationship I see it to being a spiritual path. Like I could keep going on this topic because there's so many facets of it, but it's encouraging us to connect deeper with ourselves in real time. So it's like a rite of passage where you're being witnessed as you're going into the rite itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being witnessed in different parts of ourselves. I'm trying to comprehend why it's so powerful, but it's so life-changing for me to expand into these parts of myself that I don't really even necessarily know if they're like me, but exploring that wholeness of myself and finding parts of myself that I didn't even feel close to, and then to be seen on stage in them, or even just like in a group of friends or a workshop, say, is very alchemical.
Mm. And it's
And
like,
go on.
yeah, go on. You go first.
No, go on.
I was going to say, sometimes this is where there's a miss for people being seen in like a workshop friend setting. It's safer and it's like a permission for anything. Being
Mm,
seen on stage, you're still having to deliver like a level of content and professionalism. Like you can't break down on stage. You still have to be able to hold it together. And at the same time, when I say stage, like that's a whole different conversation. But every stage has a different set uh, of norms, if you will. You know what I mean? On a keynote stage, you can't do what you might do on a stand-up stage, and vice versa. So it's like sometimes just a part of you that needs to be expressed needs to find a specific stage for that to come through.
mm. Yeah, I remember when I was doing your course and I was in Thailand at the time, so it was great because there was a spoken word open mic night once a week. At the moment in London, things are closed on in person. And two of the tasks that you set that come to mind right now was, the first was, which part of, like, what do you feel you're not, and or what are you afraid to be, maybe. And I was afraid to be boring on stage, so I got on stage and I tried to speak really slowly and really boringly, and just sit with the sensations that were coming up, as like the fears and the thoughts of, what if people find this boring, like. And then afterwards it was like, okay, that's okay, that what's the worst that can happen, they think that, and I survived it. And then the other one was, I just got on stage with no plan and I just started speaking, and again
Mm,
I survived, of course. So it was getting through these logical fears and realizing that actually it's all okay.
mm,
And often people say to me when I go swimming in cold water, they say, I can't. I think, but you can. You say you can't get on stage and talk to someone, but physically it's very easy to get on stage and speak to a
mm,
group of people. Yet people still throw this can't word around, like it kind of makes can't lose its meaning in a way.
mm, mm, completely.
Yeah. And how do you find public speaking then kind of changes the way you approach conversations with people, or interacting in groups and individuals and stuff?
I actually feel one of the biggest. So recently, I have a group of students that finished 6 months in working with me, and this is the first time I've done something that intensive. I realized, like with the smaller trainings, I'm like they're getting pieces, they're getting breakthroughs, they're getting more confident on stage, but I have over 10 years of experience on this, and I was like, I'm giving people droplets when I feel some of them are kind of yearning for more of this. So we just finished that process, and I've been having them like giving me testimonials and reflections. And this is actually going to be a really nice answer for your question. So the most common thing that people were saying is like, Miroslav, I'm just more connected to the aliveness of life. And for me, this started being fascinating because it's like this work that's lived inside me has now been transmitted, and they've built a relationship. And because we're all different, they're able to put different words on a very similar experience, a very similar facet of life. And in having more aliveness and connection with life, their conversations are opening up. They're being more engaging when they're connecting with people. Quite often I've had people say my sex life just got better. Like there's more aliveness in my sex life. I'm like, even when we call it public speaking, people get the wrong idea. That's just the doorway. And you get very good at public speaking, but it's just a doorway into aliveness. And aliveness for me is the real value. And some people have that path of a speaker, which I've been calling it, which is like, to connect to aliveness, you're going to have to go through being a speaker. But your capacity to be more intimate with life as a result of that is fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
And for me,
Go on.
go. I was going to say, for me personally, there sometimes is a frustration with like normal social situations where it's like we're all stuck pretending to be our dominant personas, and I'm like, can we just, please crack this and find some sense of rhythm or flow or ease? Like essentially I'm yearning for the aliveness, and it's like sometimes it's awesome when we crack it, and sometimes I'm like, there's just way too much social stuff to actually find what's real and alive right here.
Yeah, it's the thing of going from reading a written script or memorizing a script on stage to just going up and kind of having an intention of what you're going to talk about and ideas that are kind of in the air above your head, but not needing to know exactly how it's going to look. And that's really plays out in my life now, in relationships, in the way I do business and life. It's like, okay, I kind of have a direction and I know vaguely where I'm going, same like this podcast even, but really following what each moment wants and letting, I have this kind of image of butterflies dancing in the hand, and these butterflies look so beautiful, so sometimes you want to hold on to them and contain them and grab life when it looks so good, but of course that would crush them. So it's really letting the dance of life flow through you, through speaking, through interacting, through the way you just move through the world.
It's really beautiful. I was reflecting recently our relationship to the way we make choices. And I don't know, you've probably had this. I've lived in this for a long time. It's like sometimes something will come up and I'll know the choice I want to make, but I won't make it straight away. I'll leave it off for a week or two. And then I'll make the same choice I would have made anyway. And it's kind of funny. I'm like, I've been stressing, not even stressing. Sometimes I've just had that weight in the back of my mind being like, oh, I need to get back to this person. And I could have done it immediately, but I didn't. And I feel there's something there about how quickly can we let go into the flow and current of life without trying to control it. And the quicker we make these choices, the quicker life begins to move.
Yes. Yeah. Because I see a lot in myself. Sometimes I find it hard to put things in the diary because I have this idea that it's gonna, in the moment, I'm not going to want to, and I want to flow through life. But flowing through life is still making the decisions ahead of time. It just, like you kind of said, it's like saving all of the thought patterns for the week of thinking, oh, I need to reply to that person. I need to reply to that person.
Yeah.
So you've spoken a lot about fear from what I've heard, and kind of using fear, I would say learning to use fear as a friend or as a way to grow. How can we, for the listeners, you start to use fear in a productive way, rather than kind of what I see in the mainstream at the moment, where we're contracted by fear and we're driven into smallness from fear? How can we use fear to expand into greater, fuller versions of ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. Essentially, we have to change our relationship to it. And sometimes, like, I'm no expert in languages, but my experience is they're a bit symbolic. So when you say fear, I have a symbolic representation of what that is. And usually it means like something I'd prefer to avoid, something that's not very nice. And it doesn't even feel nice in my body. So it's like even calling that gateway fear, it's kind of like it's wrong from the onset. You don't have to do anything with your fears, just leave them where they are. What I would suggest is changing the relationship. And this is like, I'm saying you, but I'm also speaking to myself, like, 10 years ago when I first started this journey, and a lot of other people. Changing the relationship to recognize that it's the voice of yearning or calling or God asking you to come this way. And you're mistakenly calling it fear. And it's going to keep knocking on the doorway until you answer the call. And you can put that off for as long as you can, but one of two things will happen. It's either going to get a lot louder and it's going to start banging a lot more on that door. And usually I like this metaphor of quite physically banging. Like, it's like your heart starts pounding inside you. You can keep calling it fear and saying, I'm scared of it. Or you can say, okay, I'll open the doorway and see what happens. And good chance you don't know what's going to happen, because where that fear or God or whatever invites you to, and I'm using the word God here and let's say more of a non-dual sense. He doesn't have a beard. He's not even male. It's not even a he. It's just the relationship to the fullness of your own unknown potential. Like all life that lives beyond the patterns of your mind. So it's like, if we're going to more of a crypto sense, it's life asking to write a new algorithm for you. And it's scary because you've always been in the same algorithms. And now it's like something new wants to be expressed. That's all fear is. It's really simple. And it's a lot of fun when we start building that relationship. And this is also for me why something like meditation, again, symbolically in people's heads, meditation is sitting cross-legged with your eyes closed. On an embodied sense, meditation is more like the capacity to be in relationship with life. It's like having an empty page which life can then write upon or draw upon. And in the context of fear, having a relationship to your own presence means you don't get stuck in the story of fear. You can lean out of it and be like, oh, cool, this is where life wants to go and move through me. Have you had like experiences of this yourself? Do you want to share your journey with it?
Well, I wonder whether my fears have got less, or whether, because things still scare me. And I know that for me, it's not about getting rid of any fears. It's just like seeing them, like, that's interesting. I'm kind of scared to do this thing. And there's a level of discernment, which I'm learning to navigate, of whether this is like scary because I shouldn't do it, or it's scary because it's resistance. Like, I do wonder where along the way did the fear of being killed become replaced by the fear of public speaking, or even just the fear of dancing in public. And now when I notice, I wouldn't call it fear, but I've noticed when I contract myself in public and then I ask, what if these were all dogs or they were all animals? What would I do? Would I sing? Yeah, of course I would. So I'm going to sing. Like, I don't want to let humans being around affect the way that I act. And if anything, I hope that it could inspire them and remind them that, yeah, it's okay to scream and shout and cry and dance on your own on the tube, for example. And fear, I was trying to think of the last time I was really scared in my dreams, probably the past week. Some of them are coming to mind. But I feel quite a lot of trust at the moment in life? I do fear getting on stage though still. It's the kind of thing that I forget how exhilarating it is. And then you get on and it's like, whoa, I thought it was amazing that these people were speaking on stage already. And now as I get into their place, I have even more reverence for what they're doing and how they can hold themselves so confidently whilst receiving all those voltages of electricity from so many people at once.
It's really beautiful.
Do you remember the last time that you were really scared?
Yeah, all the time. So I did I did an online stage, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. And at one point I was presenting, and I don't know why, but when I present on Zoom, I'm always standing because there's just more dynamic. And quite often I found I like to put a chair that I can then lean on while I'm standing. And anyway, that leg that I had leaning on the chair, I'm like, it was bouncing. And I was like, this is fear. But the
Like
relationship to it,
shaking?
yeah, it was shaking. Like my leg was kind of going like
Uh-huh.
this. The kind of
Uh-huh.
thing like you'd see in a cartoon character when they're scared. And I was like, all right, my body's obviously communicating. There's stuff here that wants to be moved and expressed. Um, and then as I leant into it, I was like, oh, it's a level of excitement that wants to come through me that I haven't allowed myself to go into on stage before. And as I let that stream through and kind of land for the audience and be seen in it, yeah, my legs stopped shaking. So the fear was more about, can I allow myself to be seen to this capacity? Can I allow this part of me to be expressed and witnessed and influence people as well? Because essentially that's what it's doing when we're on stage.
So what do you think you were scared of?
Well, I would say probably at some stage in my life, there was a judgment around that kind of energy and it wasn't safe to express. And, you know, if we look at like historically, you touched on this just earlier, the world has not been a safe place to express. Most cultures in the world, they were oppressed at some point or another. If you spoke your truth, you're probably going to get shot or killed or burnt or something like that. And now we're stepping into a place where I'd say there's more freedom. I wouldn't say there's absolute freedom. Like you look at what happens with whistleblowers and stuff, it's like people still aren't free to speak, even if it's with good intention. Does that mean that we stop speaking altogether and just be safe? I'm not quite convinced that that's the path either. I feel that there is some messages inside us that want to come through and that want to be heard. And can we be in service to that message beyond a sense of needing to stay safe and self-preservation and everything else? You know, sometimes people say to me, I'd love to be able to speak, but I'm scared. And I kind of giggled about this. I'm like, I could probably shift that fear for you within 30 or 60 minutes and you'd be fine. And I mean that like it just happens. Like when people sit down with me, they just work through that fear. The scary thing is then recognizing that this message might take control of your life. And not control as it's going to control you, control as in it words here. It's like downstream. It's like going down a stream. It's not like you have to bang this message on people's doors. It's like the more you surrender and the more you move towards life, the easier it's going to be to speak this message. And you're not kind of controlling things anymore. You're not sitting there trying to think of the right message. The message is already inside you and it's coming out whether you like it or not. And that's the scary thing. It's scary and it's exhilarating and it's exciting and it's being completely on your path. And it's still scary because you're like, wow, I feel so strongly about this that it's moving me forward now.
Yeah, I felt that about talking about sexuality and sex and stuff. It's like, wow, I wouldn't choose this. Like, it's a lot easier to talk about, I don't know, the environment or something, because there's less judgment on myself of who am I to speak about this. It's easier to explain to family, to people you meet in the street. And that's when I really realized, like, yeah, I'm not in control of really what wants to come through me, and just really relaxing into it and be like, okay, these words feel like they're literally bubbling out of me if I don't share them. And that's when I I know that that's what I need to speak about.
It's beautiful. And I think like I like this. It's like we're not in control of what wants to come through, but we're definitely in control of how we sculpt that. It's
Mm,
like for me, speaking is it's a bit like you're an artist in real time. And this is also why I think the memorized approach doesn't always work best, because as you speak to an audience and you see how things are landing for them and you see how they're interacting, sometimes it's like, okay, I have to change. Like the art piece is a co-creation between the two of you. It's not just here's what I believe and you should believe too.
mm-hmm. So if people were listening and they're thinking, I am still scared of speaking in public, or not even still, but yeah, I feel the fear. Apart from getting on stage and practicing, do you have any advice or suggestions for ways to kind of work with the relationship to that fear?
Mm. Yeah, breathe into it. Recognize. Sorry, I don't know what that was about. Recognize that we both yawned at the
Yeah.
same time. Recognize the feeling, the fear is more important than whatever you think is on the other side. So
Mm,
whether it's getting on stage, whether it's telling someone you love them, whether it's getting, I don't know, whether it's singing a song in front of friends if you've never done that before, feeling that fear and letting it move through your system is what's going to open the doorways. Whether you sing this
mm.
time or next time, it essentially doesn't matter. Like it's always nicer if it's this time, but letting the ice melt so it's got flow is the way essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And then when I notice that fear of singing on stage or singing in front of people, it can become like a buzz for me. I'm like, oh, this is a great opportunity. I'm scared of this,
Hmm.
so I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you almost seek out opportunities like that.
Mm,
It's like, oh wow, I know that this is going to give me that kind of activation, so I'm going to lean into it.
yeah, yeah, definitely finding the edges. Amazing. So if I remember you, I think it was embodied speaker when I did it with you, and now it's enlivened speaker. What's the difference between the two?
So there was a point where I noticed, for me, the progression goes a bit like this. People sometimes start with mindfulness, which is like just getting aware of what's going on. And then embodiment is like you're bringing some of that back into your life and into the body. And sometimes embodiment it actually means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I had one woman that contacted me to work with, and I explained to her that what I was doing was embodied speaking. And she was like, okay. And she was interested, and she went and spoke to her singing teacher, and she was like, oh no, my singing teacher said she can teach me embodied speaking. And I was like, whatever your singing teacher thinks she's doing, it's definitely not what I'm doing, because she wouldn't be a singing teacher if she was speaking the way I'm speaking. It's like, it's kind of like intoxicating when you start doing it. And I don't know who a singing teacher is. Maybe she does get it. But I was like, where my intuitive sense was also like, we're speaking about completely different things and it's getting lost in language now. And I've done embodiment work, which has nothing to do with aliveness, which is like anatomical embodiment, which is interesting. You're connecting with different parts of your body. Um, but my only fascination was with aliveness, and where is the aliveness between you and me and between me and life. And I felt like from that embodiment piece, there was this third piece, which was enlivenment. And embodiment is a part of that, but it's not the end game. Like people can be embodied and still not connected to the sense of aliveness.
Mm,
And I was toying between these two names for a long time, and then I was like, oh no, this is where the work wants to go. It's like I'm not actually in controlling it. My head might think embodiment is a better marketing tool because people are familiar with the word, and another part of my soul is like, no, this is more what you're about and how the work wants to be expressed. So even though I've called it the Enlivened Speaking Institute. Um, I'm still keeping a tagline of it being an embodied approach, which is very different than the old school style of speaking, which is a disembodied approach. It's all mental. Um, yeah. Does that answer your
yeah, yeah,
question?
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely feel enlivened right now after this conversation. So if people are curious about your work and what you're doing, where can they find out more information, and what have you got going on at the moment?
Yeah. Miroslav Petrovic on Facebook. I say Petrovic, it's with a C, not a CH. MiroslavP.com is my personal website. And then Live and Speaking Institute, depending on when you launch this, it might be out, should be coming out as a refreshed website within the next couple of weeks. And what I have coming up, so I have a regular 6-week course, which is the one that Georgie did. It's the same course, but like even less fluff, I would say. I've taken away anything that was unnecessary, and it's just like the raw transmission and pieces that people need to step through. And then my favorite is the flagship 6-month course, which runs twice a year at this stage. It might be even less, it might be just once a year moving forward. But the next intake for that is starting mid-May. So if people are interested, they can reach out and connect.
Amazing. Well, I'll put also all that information in the show notes and the comments below. So thank you so much for all that I've learned from you during the course and for this conversation. And yeah, I'm feeling now inspired to keep getting my voice out there and to push, to like lean into my edges on virtual and real stages.
It's beautiful. Feeling tingles as you say that.
Yeah, we do. I also feel a lot of yawns that want to come out after this too. So thank you guys for listening, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the show.